You want the green?
Hi, my name is Bob. I've been an addict for too many years.
You want the green, or you want the red that's on that?
Agree.
Red, so weak you don't find it.
Thank you, sir.
You should be able to just click it.
Okay. The name of this talk is When Odran Is New Again. Shockingly, until yesterday, no one said, what the hell is Odran? So accepting those people who are in that conversation, has anyone figured out what that title means?
Well, it's obviously Nardo backwards.
There we go. Ding, 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 ding. Now, who knows what Nardo is? Except for Eric.
It's Odran backwards.
Except for Eric. Sorry, hand. Jake?
It's a calculator code name.
Which model?
And if you have Rick Furr's HP calculator poster, you can see it right on there. It should be, I believe, the 32S2.
Da, da, da. So it's not, maybe the least well-kept secret. SwissMicros will be introducing the DM32 based on an enhanced clone of the HP32S2. Yep.
Code name for the 32S2.
It's Nardo, spelled backwards. Nardo was the code name. It would be silly to put the code name on there because that would be obvious. But it clearly was less funny than it was intended. While I'm speaking, Gene, if you want to hand that around the room, just people hand it to each other.
We'll start in the back since you guys get ignored.
The form factor is familiar to most people. Same hardware form factor as the DM42 and then the DM41X. And there's technical stuff to come. The platform, DMCP, DM is David and Michael, the two owners of SwissMicros. And it's fundamentally similar to the other two in the sense of it's based on trying to reproduce that product as closely as possible behaviorally and keeping the spirit of that product while at the same time enhancing it with features enabled by more modern hardware, things like a larger screen, a bigger keyboard, a faster processor. So striving for as close compatibility as possible with the original so that the users of the original are very comfortable moving to it while providing enough added benefits that it makes it worth the jump to the new machine. That's what it is. What it's not is emulated. It's not running the original HP ROM, which can be a disadvantage, can be an advantage. The advantage is obvious. If it's running the original ROM, it's exactly what it is, but that's limiting in the sense of you're inheriting the limitations of 40-year-old technology. It's also not as slow as the 32S2 was, and it's not as limited in memory. And it's a funny number to talk about, but most people don't realize it today. The 32S2, which was the top of the line of the, I'll call them the mid-range RPM products, had a whopping 384 bytes of program space. Cost functions, cost was a function and this and that and so forth. But today, anyone would say, at least I like the number, it's a multiple, but why so limited? Memory, cost, and so forth. So it doesn't have those limitations. Why pick the 32S2? An interesting observation, and then I'll get into the bullet points. I put up a list of stuff in the back for the trading corner, things I have that I have available to trade, sell, whatever. The one product that 3 people have expressed interest in is an HP 32S2. So part of the point of this discussion is to say, don't buy that from me because, because something better will be available. I mean, I'm happy to sell it and so forth. But it does reflect the interest level. The 32S2 is far more accessible in the sense of it's not as complex of a programming model. It doesn't require the investment of time to learn. It's a pickup keystroke, just do it. I mean, it requires the rigor of keystroke programming. You gotta know what you're doing and know the instructions and so forth, but it's a very simple programming model where there's one program space. The programs begin with the letters A through Z, the variables are A through Z, everything is global, and so it's very simple for someone to understand, and a lot of people like it for that reason. People who said, I bought a 42S and I didn't want to spend my life learning to use a calculator, I just wanted to do simple programs. And it's one of the continually referenced comments that I hear from people who like that. What's the guy's name who did Jake, the database?
Craig?
Yes, Craig. Craig, in his database, it says specifically the 32S2 is hands down the best RPN calculator that HP ever made. You can pick it up, use it, and do whatever. Not the most powerful, not the most flexible. All those things come at a cost. It's just pick it up, use it, do it. It has everything anyone except the people in this room want to do with a machine. You know, you're not going to invert matrices and these sorts of things with it. Don't even know if I covered the bullets. It has all the standard math functions. It has the solver, integration. The 32S2 was an enhancement of the 32S, adding algebraic equations, which was all the rage at the time in the market. So people and students in particular can write an equation that looks like the one in the book and solve for it. It had conversions and binary and so forth. If you needed more complex things, there were models like the 42 that were available, or if you needed some domain-specific or application-specific stuff, the 41 was still around with ROMs and all kinds of other things. Other candidates that we talked internally are some of the other pioneers, 20S, 21S, 22S, but they're algebraic, so no, that was kind of the end of that discussion. Not that they're bad, but that was the end of the discussion.
They're just not good enough.
The 33S in some ways actually has a lot of performance improvements, and it has some other improvements, but is there anyone in this room who likes using a 33S? Right, okay, you all passed. The 35S, which is, as last year's quiz pointed out, ironically, the RPN scientific machine that was in production for the longest period from HP, suffered from broadly minor issues, but with a crowd like this that's very particular. The screen was poor contrast, the keys were not comfortable, it had the cursor keys, there were a lot of fundamental bugs in it, which in point of fact affect almost no one in what they're doing, but the presence of bugs breeds lack of confidence in the machine, and one of those bugs was the checksum to prove that the program was intact didn't work right, which further eroded confidence.
Where could you get a list of those bugs?
The museum, HP Museum Forum.
Oh, okay.
There's, and on that list, there's something like 15 or 16 bugs probably. The one that affects most people like this are the fact that the checksum doesn't work. It's just like immediate rejection of, well, if the thing designed to prove that that it's solid and everything's fine doesn't work, then what else doesn't work?
Exactly.
The other numeric ones that people found are all, they're all Joe Horn bugs. If you spend 900 hours using various numbers, you can find something, Roger and a few other people can find it, but it wouldn't affect most people who are just doing math with it, kind of thing. So ultimately, it came down to, after the top tier products, the 41, the 42, the next RPN, and the pioneers are already out there from SwissMicros, the 32S2 was sort of the sweet spot. And this is interesting that at this point, even though this is the first public discussion of it, though Michael did tease it with a very interesting video, here's a more interesting video. I don't even know if how do I?
Click it. What are you trying to do? Get the video link through?
Yeah, click the link.
How are you going to do that with a clicker? Let's see if it works. No guarantees.
Works on a PC.
My name is Logan West. I have a YouTube channel where I upload videos on HP calculators from time to time.
I hear a lot.
Some of you may have seen those. I started doing that when I was
It's
studying
playing somewhere.
for a professional engineering exam.
Just started again.
HP35S.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, now restart it.
Yeah, the death to the world virus works on a PC as well.
Well, hello. My name is Logan West. I have a YouTube channel where I upload videos on HP calculators from time to time. Some of you may have seen those. I started doing that when I was studying for my professional engineering exam, and I wanted to look up how to do integration on the HP35S and realized there weren't any videos on it. So I thought, well, I can contribute back to YouTube. So I uploaded a few videos, and before you knew it, there were some subscribers, and I did a few more videos on some other HP models. The DM42 ones have been pretty popular. And it's still something of a hobby for me. I think the HP calculator aficionado market is just a little bit too small, too niche to make a living off of YouTube doing that full time. So I still have my day job. I'm an electrical engineer. I work in radar for the FAA. But today we have a special video for you all at HHC 2022, and we hope you enjoy it. Well, hello again. So today I wanted to cover something that was sent to me recently. So a bit of a background first. In 1988, HP released the HP32. It was really a solid, general purpose scientific calculator. It was designed to have most of the commonly used functions readily available with only 1 or 2 keystrokes. In 1991, they made a significant upgrade to this by releasing the 32S2, which added some really nice features such as fractions, algebraic math. That became a real great entry-level calculator for many. Now, Michael from SwissMicros sent me a prototype of a new unit they've been working on. This is the DM32. This takes the functionality and design of the HP32S2 and upgrades it with more memory, greater precision, faster processor, save states, all the wonderful upgrades that we're used to seeing from SwissMicros. So here's the package that was sent to me. And even though this is just a prototype, I was thrilled to see the packaging on this thing and the care that SwissMicros takes with their products. So let's take a quick look. Open it up. I've got this nice black envelope here. Got a thank you card, a note from Michael. I really appreciated. And inside this little wrapping, we have the DM32. So one of the first things I noticed right off the bat when I was playing around with this is that the keyboard has a really nice tactile feel. I know there's been some growing pains along the way with the keyboards on some of the earlier models, but I feel like this one really addresses all the issues that I've seen. There's definitely been some improvements. I do want to stress that this is a prototype, so David at SwissMicros has been working hard, sometimes releasing multiple builds of the software per week. This is not an emulator, this is new firmware that's designed to run natively and efficiently on this modern hardware, so that's fantastic. So if I turn it on here, the first thing I notice right off the bat is the beautiful screen, the multiple levels of the stack. That's really nice. If I go into the settings here, you'll see we've got the regular file settings. So activate USB disk, that means you can connect it to a computer and then make backups of your system, all of your programs, that sort of thing. You also have the save and load states, and I really like that feature. So perhaps you're building lists of equations, but you're working in multiple disciplines. You can just create a set of equations for electrical engineering, one for mechanical engineering, save those states and swap back and forth really quickly and easily. Back out here, let's go to About. You can see that this is version 1.68, but again, that software is being updated regularly. Let's back out here. So we've got the regular core functionality here. So let's say I have 37, and that's something that's in Celsius. I want to convert that to Fahrenheit, so I'll shift over there. We got 98.6. I also was playing around with the equation editor, so let's say we go to enter in an equation, and we want the area of a circle. So the area of a circle is equal to pi r squared. So we've got pi times r and then squared. I'm going to solve for the area. So enter in a radius of 2, run stop, gives me an area back of 12.57. So yeah, most of the core functionality has already been implemented. It's still in development, but it's looking really, really good. And I'm excited to see what kind of upgrades SwissMicro is going to bring to this.
A lot of folks here have probably seen and enjoyed some of Logan's videos. He's very matter of fact and very casual approach to it, and good overview, and makes focuses on the appeal of the product and the how to access it. Doesn't get gory deep like I'm tending to do and so forth, which is why we thought I thought that would lend some stuff. Plus, it could be the first time a YouTube video has been featured in an HHC presentation. I'm not sure. So thanks to Logan for that. I mentioned it was built on the DMCP platform. People that have used the 42 or the 41X are familiar with them. It uses the same Sharp 400 by 240 LCD, which I think Eric showed us first years ago in the prototypes he was working on. Very high contrast, as high as you'll see. Always on in the sense that even when the calculator is off, there are screen images that you can leave on, which is literally 0. Now, Eric could say no, it's not, but from a pragmatic perspective, testing was done to show that you have essentially 0 battery consumption when it's off, with the screen on.
So I might point out the technology in this chart display is really interesting. You all are familiar probably with what are called active matrix displays. That's almost the standard kind now for anything except the lowest end segmented displays. And those have a thin film transistor used as a switch for each pixel. Sharp took that a step further, and they have multiple transistors for each pixel that actually act as a flip-flop to store the state for that pixel. So normal active matrix display still has to be scanned. These don't have to be scanned. That's why it can show a static image with essentially no power.
Several people insisted it's impossible to have a 0 current drain on screen. All of which set about doing it and instrumenting it and testing it, and came back and said, I have nothing to say about it. I'm not going to talk about my results and so forth. No one says, no, sorry, I was wrong. It also, in addition to the 4-level stack, if you're familiar with the 32S2, you can see it's the identical enunciators in the top row, bottom row. It also has the line, the status line at the top that has date, battery strength, and it will have the name of the state file. So as Logan suggested, if I have a mechanical state file and an electrical one, at a glance you can see which one you have loaded, so you can go pick another one, but you don't have to go look into it. And on the keyboard, like the prior machines, it has the additional row of keys at the top that we're going to talk about in more detail. But it has the fixed keyboard, and fixed is the wrong answer, the improved keyboard, which is a good time to point out that if you have a prior to, I believe, September 2020, DM42 that use different domes in the keyboard, SwissMicros has made available essentially a free dome replacement with a pretty easy video. If you go to the website, follow the instructions on there. Essentially, you're paying $10 to get it, but you get a $10 credit in free shipping, just to avoid everyone wants something free, so random people won't. But that extra key row at the top, we'll talk about in a moment. In here, there are people in the room who know these things better than I do. That's the bold part number for the new system chip that's in there. Several things drove this. Availability is a short-term issue, but also growth for future platform things. Some of the differences in the specs are shown. 2 meg flash, 768, also has the 8 meg QSPI, which is fundamentally the same as the other two in the sense that they both use the Intel floating point library, which is stored there. and the rest is used for the disk drive that the calculator is that you can plug into the PC or Mac to move files in and out. One of the upgrades that everyone's going to love is it's a USB-C connector. It's not USB 3. You don't need that kind of bandwidth at the cost of power, but it's USB-C, so all cords will fit in, and you don't have the angles and so forth. I can't talk to what these are, but I do know the effect of 40 nanometer versus the prior 90. And I don't even know what SMPS stands for. Eric, what does SMPS stand for?
Switch mode power supply.
Yeah, I picked the right guy there. The net effect is dramatically more power efficient to the effect of probably twice the speed of the current hardware. And maybe, it's still unproven, it's still in development, achieving the same speed on battery power as the prior one had on USB power. And we're going to have some speed numbers here in a minute too.
The prior one
Oops.
was original 32 HP, or
Sorry?
when you say the prior one?
No, versus the current DMCP platform used in the DM42 and the 41X. And there's early shots of the board. It's changed in slight ways, but fundamentally, no questions about the board? I can't believe that.
Is there actually an owl image?
Yeah, the owl.
So where the owl comes from, which is usually the first three people I showed it to said, "Where's the owl from? Why is there always an owl?" And the answer is David's daughter likes drawing owls. And she's provided some beautiful artwork, some of which is not really renderable at the scale, this size and so forth. But it's become the, I guess, probably official mascot of these. The ones that she draws are less angry looking in this one.
Weren't owls one of the off images?
The default off image is the owl in the tree. Exactly right. That's her drawing. This one has a serious / anger look kind of thing, but hers are much friendlier looking.
Angry owls.
I suspect I'll have to explain this because he's going to show it to her now. Oh, well. Some of the enhancements, it's using the same Intel floating point library, so it's 34 digits calculated precision. Doesn't mean you can enter a 34-digit argument, though that discussion continues. In the show command that's built in is show me all the digits, which even with a much bigger display, you can't see all the digits. So the show command was enhanced so that now you can see all the digits. And I guess I should be using this if I want to point out.
How many digits of pi are stored internally?
All of them.
It takes a while to get to some of them.
Yeah, it's a matter of patience.
34, it looks like.
Right, 34.
34.
There they are. So yeah, even constants. There are maybe none, maybe no other constants except built into the conversion factors, but I think that's the only constant that's in there. So that was enhanced to the 34 as well. I mentioned earlier the 32S2 has 384 bytes. We'll talk more. Did I skip memory?
No.
Yes, I did. 256K memory for the application. That's versus the current ones now that are less than 32, as I understand it, if I remember right. So dramatic resource improvement. The larger, that RAM space is 680 times the original amount of RAM. The original amount of RAM inherently made the need for resources not as big of an issue. So, for example, the labels, global labels, the program labels, if you will, there were 26 of them, and there were 26 global variables. You probably couldn't make 26 programs with 384 bytes, unless they're really, really short programs. Wasn't an issue. So to address the increased resources, things being looked at, the exact nature in which it's going to be exposed are under debate. It's still being explored technically. But, an obvious thing that people have thrown out there as a suggestion is, well, if you have capital A through Z, You could have lowercase a through z. Well, you can't really, because lowercase isn't defined, the character set and some other things, and things could be done to do that, but there's other issues there. But the point is to have at least twice as many global labels, at least twice as many global variables, and also looking at local labels, a la 41. So you can go to 00. Like one potential model is each global program, in other words, the code that you're in from the last global label to the next global label is essentially a program. And then you can have local labels, 01, 02, 03, which are only visible within that program space. So suddenly you have twice as many programs, each with local labels, non-conflicting. So that lets you use the address space much more effectively. Also, one of the things that we've all become used to is the function preview. You hold down the button and it tells you if it's signed or whatever, what it is, and if you hold it, you're like, oops, that's not the one I wanted. You keep holding it down and it cancels it and throws it away. I talked about the extra row of keys on the top. Oh, I forgot something. I forgot something way back. Let me go back. For people who are 32S2 users, what are the most annoying features or most annoying limitations of that machine?
It's not a 41.
Lack of memory.
Lack of memory, what else?
I think there is one thing you have to shift. There's a one button on the main system, but the reverse has to be shifted.
That's it. So a couple people here actually do use it, despite the earlier. If the up and the down arrow are both shifted, which is super annoying if you're programming and you're trying to move through program space, because you can't go to dot line number, that kind of thing.
Single step and back step also.
Oops. Hello.
Killed it.
There we are. So the top row of keys, by default, will have key assignments to be essentially placeholders or duplicates for more awkward key settings. Which ones we're going to put ourselves in a room and no one gets out until we all agree on which ones are the most important ones. To my eye, clearly up and down are by far the most important. Going in and out of program mode, probably one of the most important. F-disk, which is what you use for going back and forth from fraction mode, which we haven't talked much about, arguably not important if you don't use fraction mode, but if you do, you're doing it all the time. So ultimately the idea is to capture the keys you use most often that are multiple keystrokes. Another layer is to let the user customize those keys to essentially make F2 be execute F or whatever your favorite program is. So it's one key launch for your favorite programs. Usually the first reaction is, well, it just saves one keystroke, so why is that important? And ultimately it's important because you don't have to hunt in the keyboard to find where your letter is. You just know the top row key of the programs I use most often. So the user will be some means, like the 41X uses now to reassign the keys, some table in the setup that lets you say, this key is going to be I want this more than I want up or down or whatever. So the user can assign programs to those. It also inherits the other features of the DMC flagship family, which is the 42 and the 41X. It lets you capture screenshots, and this is maybe the least known feature in the products, is you just hold this certain keystroke you hold down and it lets you grab a screenshot, which for making manuals and reporting bugs is a good thing, because basically it just generates a BMP file and then you connect to the USB and drag it over, and then particularly if you have weird results or something in reporting a bug, it's really nice to have the screen capture. At which point you can just connect it to the PC or Mac or whatever, Linux, and connect it, and it just becomes a disk drive, and then there's a folder structure where you can drag files in and out. It also has the off-screen image that we talked about with the screen. The help content is going to be expanded prior versus the other models because it's anticipated that a lot of the users drawn to a more accessible, lower end, maybe less familiar product may not have manuals in the back room and may not remember what the difference between factorial and this other thing, whatever are. So there's going to be explanatory content on using some of the more advanced functions, like what do I put in if I want to integrate a function? Do I just hit the integral button and then it asks me to do something? No, you have to put this in the stack and that in the stack. But in addition, it's going to have essentially all of the numeric functions, how they're spelled and which keystroke accesses it to essentially make it manual free, at least from a reference perspective. And another feature that the 41X introduced is that the help files are a very simplified HTML format, and it's documented. Essentially, you can write your own help files and you can link from the default help file to your custom help file. So if you don't like the help that you get, you can add your own, multiple ones, edit, modify, what have you. Although many of the features in these products, the high-end products, are, we go to some length to keep them the same from model to model. We also try to differentiate some. In the case of the 41 and the 42, there were very well-defined formats of what are essentially state files. In the 41 case, it's more raw files for programs, but because both of those machines communicated with the world, there are standards out there to communicate with and exchange with. 342 would let you do it on the PC and then take the file and stick it down in. The 41X had raw files and ROM images and those things. The 32S, as having none of that, there is no standard. So there was freedom to create a new standard for the state files. And David readily came up with, once you see it, it's like, yeah, that's the right answer. That's what should have been used all along. That's a real state file from my machine that I just dumped. Everything is text, everything is human readable and writable. So if you want to enter a program, you just open a text editor, create a program. There truly are some parameters. You can't just, you see actually, interestingly, anything that begins with the pound is a comment. So you can make a richly commented source file. When it brings it in, it throws most of that away. It only keeps the content itself. When it saves it, it puts in the section headers so that the thing that you get out is clear that what these sections are. But you can add comments like the little thing here or whatever. So you can exchange files. For people who aren't familiar with state files, the idea is it contains all the information of the machine, all your programs, all your variables, everything, so that you can have multiple state files to move between different disciplines, or, and this is maybe more the case in some, is you can take the entire contents of your machine and upload it in a file and share it on the forum, or just as a way for people to move programs in and out.
Are the state files stored on the 32 itself, or are they stored on a computer and you drag it in and out?
No, they're stored I mentioned you can put it into USB mode and you can see the disk connected to the PC. There's a series of folders. One is called states/state, and there is no picture, it was in the video. Anyhow, you can create N state files, as many as you want, and when you connect it to the PC, you just see in that folder a bunch of files named whatever you name them. You just take that file and drag it to the PC and you end up with, basically, it's .d32, but it's a text file. So then you can take it and put it on the forum or share it or hack it or whatever, or add more programs and so forth. Yep.
Can you edit those files on the PC and then back
Yep. Yeah, that's the point. It's a text file that you can do whatever you want. Yep.
It says that the import is truncated upon invalid content. Does that mean that you could create a state file that's just the program? So
Yes. Yeah. Well, if you create a state file that has just a program in it, everything else should default to essentially 0, right? Because if you're not bringing it in, it won't. I believe in the middle of that. I think Joe's testing that now. It won't keep whatever was there from the last state file because it's loading a new state. But you can kind of accomplish that though by just taking the old one and editing and so forth.
Yeah, but it used to have like a library of programs.
Yeah, yeah.
You could load programs.
So Bob,
Yeah.
So there's no, for instance, on the old, with the information, you had to do this conversion, convert back and forth.
Yeah, no, this is just text.
Right.
What you see stored in that folder is a text file.
Okay.
So like if you want to add a program, as David was just saying, you just open a text editor, type a program in. It has to have, this stuff. Pointer is just which program am I pointing to, because right now, recall, it's one program space. That may change with the introduction of local variables. It's unclear. But the idea is, yeah, you just type your program in like that. And actually my example is somewhat poor because some of the functions are not as obvious as some of these, but they're well defined. And the whole discussion of what is invalid has come up. And if you think about it, like how are synthetics created? By using unnatural procedures to create sequences of instructions which aren't recognized as invalid, but yet weren't intended to be there. Joe found one, which if you use a particular character for the address, you can essentially make the program loop 30% faster, 20% faster than if you use the intended one. But that was reported as a bug. Please don't ever change this. And my guess is with time, some of the looseness of what is invalid will be narrowed for obvious stability reasons. But it was the first thing that came to my mind, the first thing that came to Joe's mind. It came up. What else? How does the DM32 compare to a 32S2? How compatible is it? We have not found a 32S2 program that will not run, which is not to say the results are always the same. The extra precision in the DM32 can lead to different results, obviously in the sense of the precision is greater, but also things like if you're using an iterative process, you may converge at a different point, or you may head off into space based on precision and round-off kind of issues. Also, the 32S2 had a notion of checksum. When you enter a program, you can look at that label and check, you do show on it, and it tells you the checksum of this program is something, and the number of bytes is that. Because the very nature of every number in here, with 34 bits, is different, we couldn't achieve compatibility. But the intent of that was, because there was no I/O on the 32S2, all you could do is key a program in, and it's easy to make a mistake. So the point was, you key the program in that someone else gave you, and like on the 48, their checksum is this, I got this, I must have keyed it right. Now that you can use text files and import and so forth, the need for doing that is not as big a deal because you can just go modify your program and put it back in. It's also easier to see when you have a text editor, are all my lines in the right sequence and so forth. So it's not as big of a problem. How fast is the DM32? The one I handed around is built on the same hardware that the other products are on today. And that's what I mean by the word current. An empty loop, like the standard simple, just fill the stack with ones, and you make a program which is plus, go to 0, plus, just loops for 1 minute. Joe did some tests on machines, and here's the numbers. The first thing that strikes people as interesting looking at this is, wow, I didn't know the 15C was that slow. But some of these others are interesting. As I mentioned, the 33S is actually very fast, 3 times the 35S, but the DM32 wins at, instead of these numbers, you're looking at this. These kind of numbers on battery and USB, 65 times, 100 times. And Joe found a great prime factoring program. I can't talk to it, something about 30 using, I don't know, I won't even try and get into it. But it's on the forum, you can see it. And you see the numbers on 32S2. It factored that. It comes up and says, yep, it's a prime after that many seconds or minutes and seconds versus that, which I believe is battery. I'm pretty sure that this is on battery. So it's probably faster than a DM42, though I haven't done it side by side with a DM42. The one other thing to mention about compatibility is if we make some of the changes to allow things like local labels that could break compatibility, because the only way you can call a subroutine on a 32S2 is to call a global program, which would change in a new program. So it pragmatically probably would technically break compatibility, but for a very good reason and for much better benefit. Is all that clear? That's all I have on that. A few other things. I wanted to, some thanks. I'm up here presenting it, but it's really the work of a lot of other people. Michael, of course, for his passion for this, creating SwissMicros and insisting on quality at all times and all conditions. Sometimes that's why things aren't as fast as they might be, but they're always as good as they can be. The recent introduction of the new foil for the 42S users is, in my opinion, an example of that. This product kind of not introducing it as quickly as it could have been by stopping to do the new platform development is another example. It'll be the better product by far with more growth. Amy is a new member of the SwissMicros team. Amy's background is in graphics and documentation. And some of the graphics kind of invisible to most people, but the reason the current LCD design and all that is pixel perfect is because Amy's he's very passionate about that stuff. And a lot of the new documentation, I haven't even talked about the manual, but the help and some of that has been going to be improved a lot. Joe, Gene, Jake, Vlad, and Logan have been involved in testing. Joe deserves special mention here. Jake has seen it. Gene has seen it. Joe, if you know Joe Horn, and you've been around him, he's a fanatical bug hunter in ways that don't, his church connections play heavily in his skills, I believe. I put in an example when the F-disk, when the fraction mode and conversions, which are affected dramatically by the extra precision that's in there, so to be able to do more. Joe found a bug, and this is verbatim his bug report in version 1.5.6. When any shift key is pressed, which of course has nothing to do with what you're doing, the current F-disk accuracy indicator gets replaced with the 1 in the T register. Now most people, if they found this bug, unlikely would have reported it as something's wrong with F-disk. I'm not getting the right results. But the bug report, for anyone here who's ever needed software testing, it's not can you find the bug. It's can you speculate on the cause and make more tests to validate your speculation and then come back with, like he figured out that the weird numbers were coming from the T register. So David's conclusion was that's a remarkable bug report, and you finding it, writing it up, took far more time than fixing it, and that's a good thing for the product, sort of thing. So that's why I go out of my way to say thank you, Joe Horn, for incredible testing. Most of his bug reports have either no comment because what can he say, or we just like, wow, that's amazing. I can't believe you found that. Of course, the HP for the Pioneers 32S2 and so forth. Questions? Dave?
Does it print?
It does not. Because what should it do? The 32S2 doesn't print. What should it do?
Print.
Print what?
You can send
Print how much? 34 places? Which is not to say that in some future version, which has never been discussed, that it can never print because the hardware that it's in has an IR LED and it can, but that was a case where earlier I said we strive sometimes to have the same features in all of them, but in other cases not to. And part of it is because just deciding what it should print and how is a significant portion of how much work is going into it. It is to create something that isn't compatible with anything in any case. You could do something not well thought out, like, well, all we're going to do is print X, which is going to lead to, well, why aren't you printing the whole stack, which is going to lead to, well, why not also printing programs, and very quickly you're into, scope growth and other things. But it could, the hardware would let it do it.
No, that's all we want. Programs and stack.
I bet if we keep the discussion going, there's more.
Plots.
Plotting. Well, there's no graphics.
Any idea how much they're gonna,
I'm sorry?
how much they're gonna charge for it?
Retail price.
It hasn't been announced, and I am not in a position to answer that, but I believe it's going to be the same as 42, DM42. Because
Oh, yeah, the hardware.
the hardware's actually it's a lot better hardware for the dollar, so that's actually a very good deal. But it's too early. The product is not done. But the obvious question: well, the original 32S2 costs less than the 42S. Shouldn't this? The answer is no, because the value being supplied is quite different than it was then. Other questions? Yeah.
I don't know, did the 32 have the normal display modes?
What do you mean?
By normal.
Fixed engineering?
Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't have standard. No, it doesn't have standard. It has scientific, engineering, and fixed. But show gives you essentially what standard would have been in a sense. It show me all the digits in the entire. You hit shift show and it. Remember at the beginning that it pops up a window and then you can see all the digits in the entire essentially all of the mantissa in the floating format you're using.
Less distractions.
I'd like to see a machine with the significant digits feature.
With what?
Significant digits. He talked about that at a previous conference.
Yes.
Well, but that was I understand what you want there, but there's a whole discussion of what how you implement that. Because, there's a lot there.
Detailed, but
Yeah, for sure. Any other questions? Eddie?
Yeah, I think it does have a standard. It's called all instead of STD for standard. And
All in standard.
Okay.
I'm kind of curious, like how you were talking about the variables. Like, how do we get double the amount of variables if there was only one, like A through Z?
Well, for example, what it won't be, but to illustrate what it could have been, or maybe, is instead of recall A, capital, it's going to be recall blue shift A, which makes it lowercase a, which is different from capital A. So poof, you just went to 52 variables from. That's not what it's going to be, but that's the idea. To make other non-conflicting namespace characters that represent global storage or global labels. Other questions?
I have been out of touch with it, but one hope I had, I'm sure it got D6, like the 88, is that, remember the 35 had all those indirect registers?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much RAM, I had hoped that something like that might show up, but I have no idea what the current status is. I had to bow out for a bit. There's a lot of RAM.
Actually, in the 32S2, the indirect register actually maps into what really is register 1, 2, 3, and so forth. So if there end up being 80 registers instead of 26 registers, the indirect register will give you access to those as well. But for example, can't use lowercase I as a variable because lowercase I is the indirect, so there's a whole bunch of things involved with that. Which was that the day I discovered that, I felt very good at noting that before pushing lowercase too hard. Other questions?
Wow, we are getting ahead of our schedule.
That's all right.
We're not done.
Huh?
We're not done.
Oh.
I have a question. Which other models, looking forward, which other model HP calculators, RPM based, are of interest to people that SwissMicros has not discussed doing? Of course, they've done the 10, 11, 12, 15. They've done the 42. They've done the 41X. We've just talked about the 32S2 or the DM32. what other models are of interest to people looking forward?
Well, there's a good statistical machine.
You have them. 16 is the best.
What? One at a time. Okay, all at once.
They have the 16. I got one.
27S.
You're reading my chart. That's a personal thing that I want. I don't know that there's enough people who also want that. To me, for my life and what I do, the 27S with RPN is the thing I would use all the time. I don't need others. I don't need hyperbolics. I don't need a lot of other stuff, but I do need financial stuff and business stuff much more than I need the other stuff. The 27S is an awesome machine, but it's hampered by algebraic, but it also has the Pioneer solver. So, but I just don't think there's enough people as wacky as me to say that. Chuck?
See my presentation. I want that. If you build the thing in my presentation, I'll buy it.
Okay. Well, I promised to buy several of these, but it wasn't enough. Eddie, what's up?
I will join your suggestion with the 27S, swapping it for RPN. That sounds.
My point in this example was not to get people on board what Bob wants. It was just to say, don't stick to HP made this, so they're going to make another one of that, because algebraic and RPN and things like that can move around. So think out of the box in terms of the.
How about a TI-88?
I happen to know that there's a solid business case to not do that. Dave.
21.
Well, it's not an HP, but the DM43. My understanding is it's the WP34, but with the full display and
There's gory amounts of information out there about that, and that is built on the current DM platform. That is nearing the end of development. I won't say it's done. It's nearing the end of development, at which point I'm not in that discussion other than as an observer. But I mean, so there's two sets of. It probably will come in two different ways, as most people have watched it. Walter has created a phenomenally detailed and beautiful document and spec for the product. It's the 34S plus the things that they couldn't get done because of the limitations of the HP30B that they use for it. But it has added some other things. They've gone to, instead of 4, you can have 8 level stack. You can, there's a lot of stuff. If you think you like high-end RPN, look deeply. I mean, there's two manuals, each 400 pages or something like that. There's a phenomenal amount of detail on that, and it's nearing the end. One of the things that started happening early on for testing during development, they essentially made, I think it's based on Qt or whatever, a Windows-based emulator of it, but to make it viable to run on the SwissMicros platform, they also had to make essentially a DM42 version of it. And a lot of people had DM42 so they could put the firmware, but the keyboard design is completely different for good and bad reasons. The keyboard design is very different. So a guy, Gunter, what's in South Africa? Jacob. A guy from a very active member there said, I have a 42. I don't like the new keyboard design, so I'm going to take the code and make my own branch of the code and make all those features work with the DM42 keyboard as far as what's printed on the keys, and then make an overlay and so forth. So what's printed on the keys is exactly the same as what's on the keys. Once the product comes out, both versions are there. And some people have, critiqued what they're doing, saying, well, just buy one, man up and buy one. Are you really trying to save money and so forth? And it's not a money issue. It's if people have the machine, you literally can, in about a minute and a half, put in firmware to make it a 42 and put in firmware to make it a 43S. Yeah?
Maybe I personally would be interested in a review of a 25.
I'm sorry?
A 25C.
Probably
no worthwhile business there, but
So that's where we're going to get to why. Not to say that it's not a bad machine, but why a 25? What about the 25 makes you want to get a new one?
Or 29.
29.
How about a 6? Remember the
Okay, you can't throw a number out without saying why. How's that? Is that a more engaging project?
If you're gonna go for a DM48, you might as well go all the way and do a 50, DM50.
I'm afraid you've crossed into a religious subject.
Religious.
There are far more people asking for a 48 than a 50.
Yeah.
We don't have time, unless you want to use the spare time. We don't have time to get into that. But I understand what you're saying. But both of them are dramatically significant challenges. You know, Chuck, you'd have a better feel than anyone else here. How many people were on the design team for the 48 that built it? 20? Yeah. So it's not the scope issue of doing it. You know, and people say, well, just build a machine and that will run the 48 ROM and people can download it and so forth. This is not a viable way to approach it. You can't do it that way. It has to be embraced and supported by the people who control the 48 IP or not, you know. And that's not a discussion for today. Yep.
Is there an interest in, because there were models that never reached production, but just kind of were a little too late, like the 95 and so on. There's aspects of them to bring those models forward and say, you have now a chance to have a part of that and still have good functionality. So is there an interest in looking at models that almost made it but ran out of time?
When you say the 95, you talk about the 95C, the desktop?
Yes.
I don't think there's I can't speak for what Michael considers in and out of bounds, but I don't think there has been a lot of public demand for a desktop version, probably because...
I wouldn't do it as a desktop, I'm saying...
Oh, you mean the special programming features that the 95C had?
As close to the keyboard as you could.
Yeah.
An adaptation of those sort of things to say, well, if you wanted a 95C, here's as close as you can get to it. It would give you like the 29 and 25 in a sense.
I think
you never could acquire.
We haven't talked about that at all, but I think that there would be no inherent objection to doing that. But what they build is largely based on demand, in the sense of what have people said, I want one of these, I want one of these. DM30.
Try it as a research, just put out some feelers.
Well, but the 32 came about from the number of people saying, I want a 32. It wasn't just me and some statistics or anything like that. It was from people saying it. So while you're right that would benefit a lot of people, not many people have thought of that and therefore are asking for it and so forth. It would be a dramatic amount of work to do the system design and then propose it. Oddly, that specific discussion has been had to add unique things that never came to light, like the programming stuff in the 95C, and everyone's like, what's a 95C? I'm like, see?
So that already happened.
Not to the depth that you'd like. But the point is, everyone was open to it because, well, if there's good ideas out there that people will like to use, then we should talk about them, which is kind of why I said this stuff, like don't limit yourself to a machine. Think in terms of features and stuff. Dave?
If it was relatively easy, and relative is a relative term here, if it was relatively easy to make new keys and a new faceplate, then the question of what to build could be pushed out to any developer. What I mean there is, if I wanted to do a DM48 and I wanted to just run an emulator, run Eric's emulator, if for $500 I could get keys and a faceplate to put on that platform, then
faceplate's easy. That's being done now. Keys are a much harder thing. Keys are the bane of everything except every calculator ever made, with the exception of the ones we all hold near and dear to our hearts, which is one of the reasons we hold them near and dear. Keyboards are incredibly hard to do with the kind of quality and feel that we want and expect. And in particular, they're even harder to do not in volume. So it makes what you're saying, I mean, you're literally better off with labels which is an unsatisfying, I mean, from the Panamatic thing. On the other hand, the bezel is easy to do. People are doing those now for the 43S and for other ones. So, but a 48 wouldn't work well because it needs another row of keys. Yep, Amir?
How about, what about implementing the DM42 and the DM41X for the iPhone and Android devices? Selling them as emulators?
Well, I suspect the key ingredient to that is, last I checked, SwissMicros sells hardware. Which is not to say that's not a good idea or that it isn't being discussed in other circles, but I'm not sure that it's a business model question. But let me ask you a question. What about the DM42 would make you buy an iOS version as opposed to free 42 or plus 42?
No, I mean, I would buy them because they would be included with my phone and I don't have to stack up more stuff.
Well, but just let's talk about the 42. The DM42 came from free 42, which is available there.
That's true.
In the 41X, there are emulators there.
That's true, yeah.
They don't have, I mean, it's been discussed that some of the things that we did for the 41X, like with ROMs and all that, there's discussion, and I've heard that there's different development efforts underway to accomplish those same things. Sylvain?
You could create a blank nut.
But you still have the key labeling issue.
No, blank nut, a real blank nut, and the person put whatever it is he wants on it. So you can put any software. You got the hardware, the key.
Well, from a software perspective, that's being done right now. Last week, a guy introduced a spreadsheet program for the DM42 hardware, which is not a DM42 program that acts like a spreadsheet. It's a dedicated spreadsheet application written in C that runs on the DM42 hardware. It's just it's a spreadsheet. That's all it is. That's all it does. Optimized to only be a spreadsheet. So from a development perspective, it's viable. The keyboard and the hardware side of it is part of what makes it more challenging.
Yeah, but that's the thing with the blank nut. For SwissMicro perspective, they have only one. That product. They don't have to specialize for other products. They have a blank nut. They set it, and the developer.
Well, with nothing printed on the key itself.
Well, I don't know. You could like do like HP did with the numbers. And
Well, but that's a blank nut 41, right? Where the keys were what a 41 has. If they're going to be doing a particular model, you can do. I mean, if you take a DM42 and take the faceplate off, it's a blank nut.
not really, because you have all the other ones.
The keys have symbols on them.
Yeah.
I understand, but
make no symbols on any keys, nothing on the face.
But then you're back to putting stickers on the keys to do anything
That's
like
up to somebody else.
Well, but you can put stickers on the current hardware.
But it's harder on the keys. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah, no,
Faceplate, you got to take that thing off.
keys that are flat on top to make it easy to put stickers on them. It's been done. It's been explored.
And HPIL on the DM41X are the new generation.
As much as I want it, there's nothing planned at this time. But new, more powerful hardware makes things like that more viable. But that would be a demand issue in a sense. No small number of people have already said, I want HPIL for my 41X.
No, because that door was closed from the beginning.
The only door that was closed is the 41X as it's being introduced does not have HPIL. Nothing was ever said that it never will. And that was the wrong thing to say. Anything is available. All these things, as has been proven by the DM42 and the 41X, all these things are possible and can be done. But it's a demand thing. If only you, me, Jean-Francois, and 17 other people are going to use HPIL, they're not going to build it. If 10% of the people on the forum that are buying their products are saying, I want it, I want it, I want it, it'll happen. So it's really a communication and a demand issue. Yep.
There are two specialty machines that were done by HP that were very good, but because of the limited market, they didn't go for it. One was a 16, and the other one was a 21, right?
21S?
Yeah.
Yep. The stat machine?
Yeah.
Or do you mean the original 21?
Stat.
The stat machine,
Stat,
21S.
yeah, stat. And because statistics is used everywhere in all fields, physics, chemistry, whatever, you can't do much without having some statistics. And
I have no statistics to back up what I'm going to say, but the 32E, if I'm not mistaken, has some unique statistical functions not in any other models until the 21S came out, neither of which were bestsellers of any magnitude.
yeah, that's right.
The 21 was algebraic.
Sorry? Oh, right, but relatively speaking. But I mean, the 21S is a really, really good machine. If you like statistics, it's unmatched as far as I know for statistics. But the irony is, you're right, statistics pervade all fields, financial, business, and everything, and yet they remain not good sellers. Is that a marketing challenge? Is it a feature challenge?
There weren't even statistics in the PPC-ROM for distributions and stuff like that. No, it didn't rise to the level of putting it in the ROM either.
Yeah.
Which is why I suggested in my presentation that you combine the 27 feature set, the old SPICE 27 feature set, with the HP 12 feature set, with the 21 statistical functions. That calculator has the best of all three worlds and is RPN and would fit.
All those people who don't want hyperbolics but still have life to live?
It doesn't have hyperbolics. But
That's what I'm
you
saying.
you don't need it.
It's what real people need to live their life and get stuff done.
And in many ways, that's the 10B2 Plus that had RPN.
It is.
That was very close.
It is. If that
Not
machine
quite,
had
but very
RPN,
close.
it would be a very different view. Yeah, that's a great machine. I'll buy several of those right now. Roger.
Does SwissMicro make their own keyboards? The keyboard on that one from I passed around was very nice.
It is made to their specs. They're not an industrial manufacturing plant.
I mean, they didn't take an HP one.
No, and to be fair, there were iterations that didn't go as well to get there. Like anything, industrial design will kill the best designed and working products. So it took some time to get there, but it's invisible to the market. But more time is spent on keyboard design and testing issues than anyone but a handful of people in here that have been involved with it would believe. It's a phenomenally hard problem to solve. And you would think it isn't, because everything in our lives has buttons and they all work the same, right?
No. Hey, Bob?
No. Yeah. You have a question? Give me the team? I'm just responding
Give me
to
the
questions.
microphone.
Okay. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. One last thing. I couldn't put it out there yet, but an additional prize for the table from SwissMicros is a DM32.
Oh.
But it's the current hardware. So what we're looking for, anyone that goes to the table can take it and it's yours. But the reason it's going there is looking for someone else who is interested in participating in the testing between here and launch. So it's going to go out there shortly. It's going to go out there later today. Thanks again.